Let's talk.
Charles Brown.
Pasión, a journey to the soul of Spanish football. The heart and soul of Spanish football examines the rich diversity of the country's footballing culture and how the game sometimes unites the nations. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined live on the line by European football expert Miguel Pereira. Miguel, good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Whereabouts are you? In Spain, Portugal, the UK? Where are you today?
Right now I'm in Portugal. Next week I'll be in Spain, so I'm all over the place.
Now, you've written about Portuguese football before. Was it Over the Horizon or Onto the Horizon? The book.
Yeah, Bring Me That Horizon.
Yeah.
Which some confuse with the band, with the famous rock band. So,
and that was about Portuguese football. So what? Which is a wonderful, beautiful thing that a lot of people have only recently discovered. What made you want to dip your toe into the fascinating, shall I just say, emotionally charged world of Spanish football?
Well, basically because I'm full Iberian. I was born in Portugal, lived there until I was 22. So when I wrote Horizon, it was like a nostalgia trip to my childhood and to my youth days to get to tell the story about the football in my country, which is particularly unknown, especially in sports literature. But then when I was 22, I moved to Madrid and I lived there for 16 years. So I became Spanish, probably more Spanish than Portuguese now. And I fell in love with the country, like many people who are listening now did. And eventually, throughout the time, I started to know more about not only the football culture, but the culture in general and the differences that exist in Spain. And it was strange for me that for a country like the UK, who has such rich sports literature, there were so few books about Spanish football altogether. So when I finished writing Horizon, I proposed Fitch Publishing, which are the wonderful publishers I work with, to go ahead and pick up the car and cross the border and do the same book, the same travelings, because I travel all around the place. I interview people from all areas of Spain, talked about almost 40 different football clubs, people, managers, and mix that with the history of Spain, with the history of Spanish culture, identity. And that was the most fascinating part of the book, because I always believe that sports, particularly football, explain very well what the society we are living in each given moment. So football is always a good excuse to talk about.
And it's a really interesting time to be doing it because, I came to Spain in the 80s. And the national team was seen as always the nearly men. They were always getting to semi-finals or finals or quarterfinals. These great teams like players like Butragueño, etc., and Luis Enrique, and just not winning anything. And then came that period between sort of 2006 when they won the European Championship or the Euros twice and the World Cup, and suddenly Spain just took off.
Yeah. I think it was an issue of people not talking to one another, because remember, Spain came from like 3-4 decades of dictatorship and people were more isolated. People were more connected within themselves. So the 80s were a time you lived there, so a time of people getting more open, more able to connect. And those shifts take time to cross borders. And it arrived to football to a new generation who was already born during the democracy period of the 80s. Those were the players that came out as winners at the end of the 2008. So now we have a new Spain. You have a more multicultural Spain, which is also winning again, because they are also reflecting a new pattern, a new people coming to Spain and embrace their Spanishness. And that's also very beautiful to see.
Yeah, this is the thing, because, you mentioned that whole situation. You can argue the point, Miguel, that during the years of repression, football was the only way that a lot of people could express themselves in terms of their, because Spain is a country of different regions. So, you go to the Basque country, Atletico Bilbao, etc., Athletic Club. You go to Barcelona, and I remember the first time I went to see the Clásico at Nou Camp being absolutely blown away. It is the way that people have shown their regional identity, which was suppressed.
Yeah, eventually. For me, Spain is a nation of nations. It's probably the most complex country in Europe because it's the only country in Europe. Then you have different languages, people who live in the same nation but have different cultures, different habits. So football was a way to unite them all. But in the end, it took its time. People used to use football as a tool to express their individuality and the power of their regions. And eventually they found out a way to connect among themselves. The national side wins of the past, let's say, 15 years helped a lot. But also, I think there was a shift in society as well. I think Spain has evolved a lot in that sense. And despite the regional differences are still there and are still very much present, there's also a common tongue now being spoken.
Yeah, but also you mentioned that thing about people like players like Nicole Williams and Yamal, who is absolutely setting the world on fire. And that reflects, again, a Spain that is thankfully unrecognizable from those teams of the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah, and also a society that differs a lot, because in the 50s and the 60s you had, the players born there, players who had physically a different template that they have now because of the poverty, the hunger days that they were living through the first years of the fascism rule. And now you have a Spain that is more open, because Spain has always been a place in Europe that was open to the world. You're in the southern part of Spain, and that was always a melting pot of different cultures. Now you have the melting pot, people coming from North Africa, people coming from the north of Europe, from the UK, with the common Spain. But this was happening 3,000 years ago with the Phoenicians, with the Carthaginians, with the Romans. So eventually this is a place where people do get together and learn how to speak one another. And football now is a perfect excuse to do that in a peaceful but delightful way.
You see, Miguel, you've just mentioned Phoenicians, Carthaginians and Greek. The problem is that I'm a history buff and the listeners are going to be going, oh, for goodness sake, he's opened up that particular door. But let's please not make it an age. I mean, I could do, but let's not go there. But listen, one of the things I find really interesting, let's get this one out of the way, because the two giants of Spanish football, Real Madrid and Barcelona, and for those who, I used to live in a tiny village, which was an hour north of Malaga. So that's the nearest, at the time, La Liga club. You didn't have many people who supported Malaga, but you had a Peña for Real Madrid and you had a Peña for Barcelona. Even though this village had never been to any, either the capital or the Catalan capital, it just shows how, are you Barcelona or are you Real Madrid? And if you say, no, I'm Malaga, they look at it as if you've got two heads. Is that because of the way it was structured before and Real Madrid was Franco's team and got all the money?
Well, I think that there's a lot of legends about that and real urban myths. I think it's about winning. I think if you live in a country, and that happens a lot in Southern Europe, not only in Spain, also in Portugal and Italy as well, Greece, Turkey, all those nations, there's no localism as there is in Northern Europe, because people are poorer. And when you're poor and you have a tough week and you're working in the fields or you're working on the sea or you're working on factories, you want to get to the weekend and you want to have something to enjoy and win. Is a shortcut to have a very good time. So Real Madrid and Barcelona are the winners in the history of the Spanish game. And if you go back in time, if you have arrived in Spain in the 1950s, probably you had a Peña for Athletic Club because they were winners at the time too. So they simply stopped winning in the 1960s onwards. And you probably in a lot of places in Spain have Peñas of Atletico Madrid because for a time they were winners. So people connected with the winning side because they wanted to feel something positive in their lives. They wanted to belong to something bigger. And there was not much to be proud about in Spain during those days. And surely not in localism. But now I think the pattern is changing. I think people are embracing even more the local clubs. We've seen in Malaga the past 2-3 years how people really connected with the football club, both the people that are from Malaga from generations, but also people that came from the outside. And the book tells that story as well. But with different clubs, with Deportivo in the other side of Spain, in Galicia, that happened. With Castellón, happened as well. So people are really trying to forget all about the need to win, because now football has evolved into a business. So they lost something of nostalgia and carelessness with the football clubs, and they have learned that to be closer to your community also brings joy and connects you with people. And in a world that we are so disconnected all of the time, to be able to go on a weekend with your mates to see a football match or have a pint, it's probably more rewarding than just to see a football club winning the Champions League.
Because you travel around Spain, and this might sound like a really stupid statement, but Spain is huge. And for those of us living on the costas, we don't realize. So that's when you go to a match at, like, let's say you go to La Rosaleda or you go to the Nou Camp, there are very few away fans at these things. They tend to be more of a family atmosphere because of the huge distances that you're traveling.
Yeah, and about all about infrastructures, because eventually, when you are in Northern Europe, when you are in the UK or in Germany, who has lots of away fan culture, you have trains that connect you with every single city in half an hour, in 1 hour. So you'll be able to move around the country, not paying a lot of, and with an easiness to get to places. And Spain, regretfully, that doesn't happen still. So we'll still take like 3 or 4 hours to come from Madrid to Malaga or to Seville. You have 4 hour train almost from Madrid to Barcelona. So that makes it harder. And also, there's not that culture installed, because it usually was very expensive to move around Spain. Only rich people until the 90s had cars. Highways were not that good. You remember those days still. So eventually, the culture of away support was more local. I remember, for instance, a good story in Andalusia where the green marches of Betis fans, because Betis is very big in Andalusia and they moved around a lot, but they moved in Andalusia, which is big enough, but at least it's close. But then when they had to move and travel with the wayside to Galicia or to Asturias, which is in the other part of the country, almost half of them stayed at home because it was almost impractical. Betis won their only championship when they were playing Santander, the other side of Spain, and they took a full day to get home by bus to celebrate with the supporters, because that was the time that you took in those days to cross the country.
But that is Betis, and that would be the most brilliant bus trip ever. If you know that, I mean, that if you go to Sevilla, the two teams, there's Sevilla and then there's Betis, and Betis. I mean, I've been to see Betis play Chelsea, and that was again so much fun. I mean, so much fun, and that is one of the things that we have, that Spanish football perhaps has as an experience that doesn't have perhaps the worry that sometimes you get at a game somewhere else in Northern Europe.
Yeah, and I think Spain, probably the most passionate country in football is Argentina. I think everyone does that for granted. But I think the Argentinians are a mix of Spanish and Italian. So you get the two sides of it. And in Spain, not only in the south, because people are used to say, the Spanish southerners are very passionate, but in the north as well. If you go to see a football match in Galicia or in the Basque country and in Oviedo, they are all over the place. Yeah. It's a very much more like a British experience to go to a pitch in Eibar or in San Sebastian. But it's passionate as well. And you have the happiness of people. It's not physical conflict. People don't go and get themselves in trouble. They go to enjoy the experience and go to enjoy the community that they have found by supporting a football club. And that's the most beautiful part. And that's also that passionate side that then I try to replicate in the titles book. I'm intrigued that you went to Deportivo La Coruña, because obviously that was a football club that won the Champions and now finds itself several divisions down. I mean, but still has the support of its local communities. That again, it's the España Verde. It's Galicia, isn't it? It's very, very, it's different from what the Southerners are used to. Yeah, and they probably have more support now. That's the strange thing, because when they were winning back in the 1990s, the Super Depor famous team, and then when they won the league in 2000, like you said, and played Champions League semi-finals in the following years, most of Deportivo supporters weren't supporting Deportivo when they were in the second or the third tier. They were supporting Real Madrid or Barcelona, like you said before. And then Deportivo started to win, and then they started to go and watch matches and support Deportivo. But now the new generations that are full packing Riazor, that helped the club climb from the third tier to the second, and now they will probably try to reestablish in the second tier for a while. They are guys that were born now when Deportivo was already on a low. So they started to support the club by sheer love of the city, sheer love of the football culture. And that is one of the most beautiful experiences I had with this book, because I travel around Spain thinking about the history of Spain, and I found out there's a whole new Spain that is being brewed with the different generations, the way they see the game, the way they feel the game. And that's a very good contrast to explore inside the book pages. And also, of course, we have, because hopefully we're moving around away from that image of, because the politics of Spanish sport, the politics of the boardrooms and the presidentes of Barcelona or Real Madrid are Byzantine, they're Liberanthine, they make, they are sopranos, aren't they? I mean, and just another thing as well, this is two questions, and also, this is a thing that you have Marca, you have Mundo Deportivo, you have ASE, and yet in the UK and England, which you think is sports mad, there has never been a sports paper. Yet there is enough news and information and Pasión to have not just one national sports newspaper like Marca or Mundo Deportivo, but 4 or 5. I mean, that just shows the depth and how much people want to read about it. Yeah, I try not to talk about a lot of refereeing in club chairman because I could write a trilogy on that. I think everyone could because they contaminated the way people live the game so much. But the press, I do talk about the press and the Spanish culture because that's really important because they define how people see the game. Actually, like you said before, in northern countries, people used to follow the games through fanzines, through radio, through talk shows. And in Spain, the idea of having a press that has news 24/7, that always needs to create some sort of noise, always needs to fill the pages, so that they need to deep down stories that have no meaning whatsoever, but that impacts the way people live the game, because probably in most countries, people live the game on weekends, then they disconnect of the game during the week, and then they will reconnect. And in Spain, they don't. They live the game Monday morning, they live the game Tuesday afternoon. If they have a new news about a new manager or a new player they sign on Wednesday, they will be talking about all that until the match on Saturday. So the idea that football is as part of your life as go working, as to dine, as to sleep, it also intricates in the way that Spanish are as passionate as they are and the way they live the game.
And also the way that you don't have to be Spanish to appreciate. I'm thinking of the great John Robinson, who was the ex-Liverpool player, who was a TV pundit, spoke brilliant Spanish. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. And then you have people like Schuster, for example, Bert Schuster, bringing their. You don't have to be. It's not just for Spanish. It is open and inclusive.
Yeah, you and I are also examples of that. We came from the outside and then we fall in love. Obviously, I already followed Spanish football when I was living in Portugal since I was a kid. I grew up in a town that was near the Galician border, so I got a satellite to get some matches. But when you're here, when you're inside the country, when you're having the typical conversations, breaking coffees or cigarette breaks on work, and the only thing people talk about is football, then you really understand how important it is to people and how important it is to win, how important it is to have fun, the local petty rivalries, and how many people think they are knowledgeable on the game as well, because that's another thing. Every Spanish football is a national manager, like someone said before. Every Spanish football is their local manager. Every Spanish football would have been the best player in the world if there wasn't for an injury when they were 12 or 13. So we all know that they are very much in love with the game at every sort of level. But that, in a way, is also why they are so passionate. It's also why they want to live the game as they do. And that's why we love them as well.
Do you have a warning on the book about people who have never listened to a Spanish radio commentary on football? Because if you're used to a Northern European commentary on football, it's very impartial. It describes the match, and this player has passed to that player, and they've had a shot on goal, it's missed. If you listen to a Spanish commentary on the radio, as I did Real Madrid, because I was driving Real Madrid against Arsenal, and Real Madrid didn't even win, but my goodness, I mean, if you are of a nervous disposition, listening to, one of the Onda Cero or something like that, you will be very, very nervous because there's the shouting, the golazos, etc., etc.
If you're fighting for a ball in the middle of the park in England, there's silence in the air. But if you're fighting for a ball in the middle of a park in Spain, you're like in World War III. and probably when you look at the shows that radio broadcasts, even TV broadcasts in Northern Europe, they are more contextual. They always tell different stories that accompany the game. But in Spain, they are living it. Yeah. And people are not shy to be open in the club they support. They actually think that it's a more honest approach to be vocative about what they feel when the national side plays, when each different club plays in Europe or both in La Liga. You have almost every region in Spain have different radios that really connect with the local club. So I think it's also because they think that people who are listening to that radio station already know whose club that radio station supports. So they want people to feel they are inside the cabin with them, living the game. I think it's selling an experience as well. And that's probably one of the richest of Spanish media, is that they don't offer you that impartiality that you sometimes might expect, but they do offer a front seat on the event, like you were actually there sitting alongside them and other supporters like yourself and living the moment.
And also the other thing is, if you think about it, the way that the managers, the players are ambassadors for their country, and they really have been. I mean, the thought of having a Spanish manager 20 years ago would have been laughable. And that you now have Pep Guardiola, who is, who's as far away from the stereotypical image of a Spanish footballer or a Spanish football manager as would have been. He's thoughtful, he's intelligent, he speaks brilliant English. You know, obviously he's been in Germany as well. He's a European, and Mikel Arteta as well. You know, they've used this, and to a certain extent, Jose Mourinho, because obviously he was at Barcelona for a while. Please, Miguel, don't shoot me down. I know he's, you know, Porto, etc.
No.
But you see what I'm saying? They represent that. We were talking about the way that football represents the new Spain, and perhaps Guardiola has been a vanguard because now everybody looks to Spain for, you know, a first choice. Which Spanish manager is available? You know, Pellegrini going over to Manchester City, etc., etc.
And exactly, it's a reflection, like you said before, in the 1980s, probably the greatest managers in Spanish football were foreigners, because the country were finally able to open themselves after so many decades where it was very hard to find a foreign manager in the La Liga. And if they were probably Spanish-speaking managers coming from South America. So when the 80s came, a lot of Dutch managers came, a lot of German managers came, people from Eastern Europe. So different ways to see the game started to pop up, and people that were starting to play, like Guardiola or other footballers during the 90s, started to learn more about the game from different views. So those are the managers that are now taking the position to be front runners of this new trend. And also at the same time, we had the language barrier, because we all know how difficult it is for Spanish people to speak another language that is not Spanish. So they never thought they need to, because during the years of Franco, they were not thinking of moving around anywhere else. So there was no need. And also because being Spanish, such a language well spoken in the world. So they thought, okay, if I don't have a job in Spain, I will have in South America and Central America. So no need to learn English or to learn Italian or to learn German to go outside. But this new generation, they do know how to speak different languages. So that opened a lot of new opportunities to them. They knew how to connect with players from other countries. They knew how to connect with the press, with the fans. And that also helped to put them on the spotlight. And then the mix of knowing different cultures over the past 25 years, that mix in La Liga during the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And with this new approach of this young managers now turn into icons, we have this Spanish manager tag as a shortcut to win.
Yeah. And also, just I'll leave you with this one, because I think it's really good. Of all the players that symbolize Spain, Iniesta, unassuming, he wasn't like Torres. He wasn't fated by every other club. He wasn't a hard man like Puyol, iconic. And Iniesta just got on with it in a way that perhaps other players, you know, his work rate was amazing. That whole team's work was amazing. But, you know, for the person to put the ball, to score the winning goal in that World Cup, it had to be Iniesta, didn't it? And it just shows, it's just a real symbol of Spain at that time and their greatest triumph thus far.
Yeah, and I think Iniesta is also a reflection of what Spain is as a nation, because, okay, he's a Barcelona icon, is an idol in Catalonia, but he comes from Albacete. He comes from the Spanish area that people, even Spanish, don't really know too well. Yeah. So people from the outside even less. So he represents a Quixote. He represents the Almodovar cinema. He represents the idea of a Goya painter. It's all in him. It's like when you look in the UK and you see Bobby Charlton, and you see Bobby Charlton represents much more than Manchester United. It represents the idea of an England, of industrial England, a guy that comes from the northern part, that is very well behaved, with all the attributes that people looked for an icon in those days. And I think Iniesta does the same for the Spanish. He represents the way Spain wanted to see themselves in a positive way. His humbleness, his talent that goes under the radar so much, but at the same time, the ability to perform and to outshine when everyone is expecting him to fail. So I think it is the perfect symbol of what Spain is as a nation, also as a football nation as well.
So what are you hoping that people are gonna learn, gonna understand from Pasión?
Well, I do hope they learn more about the country in itself, because apart from football, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of cinema, there's a lot of tourist routes. So I think Spain is still a very unknown country outside of Spain, and even for some Spanish. And I think one of the good things that people could go out with this book is learn that is very different Spains within Spain, very good stories that have never been told or rarely have been told that deserve to be told. And okay, you can read about Real Madrid and Barcelona on the national side, of course, because they need to be there and they deserve to be there. But you also need to know about smaller clubs from the interior. You also need to know about the fascinating mix in Andalusia of culture with sports. You need to understand how people in northern Spain really do believe that their roots define them. So all of those tags are mentioned in the book and are experiences that need to be read about and then lived. I strongly recommend people to ground hop after reading the book, because you'll find most of the experiences really fascinating.
Absolutely. Any book that's got a picture of Joaquim on the front, the Betis legend holding a trophy, is because he's in Malaga and Real Madrid and obviously Betis. Legend. The book is, if people want to find you online, I know you're on the social media, so where's the best place to find you again?
Well, I'm usually more on the former Twitter, now called X. I was going to call it Twitter all the time, and Miguel_L Pereira, and also on Instagram, Miguel.lp8. So basically that's where I'm usually at. And you can find me there talking about the book a lot of the time.
And you'll be able to order you'll also be order the book via our own virtual bookstore. The book is called Pasión. It's by Miguel Pereira. Miguel, it's been an absolute pleasure and a lot of fun to talk football with you today.
Thank you for having me, Giles.